a barrel of oil coming off the ship in port is $140 a barrel. So that's considerably higher than the paper price on Wall Street. Yes, the strategic petroleum reserves are being run down, not just here, but all over the globe. We have halted any exports of fuel because we're going to need all of it here. We're that close to the edge. Our refineries have been operating at full capacity, but we can't afford to supply the whole world. It's just impossible. And of course, stupidly, we and the British and the Germans and French have provided the Ukrainians with long-range missiles and drones that are being used to strike the petroleum refining industry in Russia. I mean, it's just a very dumb idea. By the way, we're also buying Russian oil, so it makes you wonder what the hell we're thinking.
Yeah.
That's part of the issue. The other issue, though, is that economically and financially, our position is very fragile now. We haven't talked a lot about it, but in addition to oil, which is very important, and you're seeing the supply chains adjust and reorient. In other words, people are structuring for the future, which doesn't really include us. We're seen as a menace that's going to undermine or subvert the global structure, the global economic structure. That's one problem. Second problem is our currency. We just shipped, I don't know how many billions of euros from a euro slush fund somewhere inside our government that I'm not familiar with to boost the Japanese financial system, to essentially rescue the yen from destruction. Well, that's a temporary fix, Judge. It's not going to fix the problem in Japan, just as we can't fix many of the problems that we confront right now. Everything is temporary. Everything is a quick fix to get through the next quarter. And that's not going to work. And then finally, we have these people in the White House that surround President Trump and others on the Hill that I'm sure are part of this, who have benefited enormously from shorting oil through the series of ups and downs that President Trump has taken us in the oil markets. I think that too is coming to an end. I think we're not going to be able to manipulate the markets in the future the way we have to this point. Reality is going to strike home. And I don't know what that's going to do to the dollar, because the world, as we know, is increasingly de-dollarizing. And so I wonder about the entire system. And then finally, you have this strange phenomenon. On the one hand, you have interest rates that are rising, and at the same time, the bond yields are rising. Normally, when interest rates go up, bond yields go down, but they're not going down. And when you raise this, people are saying, "Oh, don't worry about that. That'll fix itself." Well, it's not fixing itself, and everybody knows once you hit that 5% mark on the 10-year bond yield, you're in a lot of trouble because you can't service the debt. And the servicing the debt's well over $1 trillion at this point.
Right. The debt will be $40 trillion before the end of President Trump's term. Colonel, is it true that the Iranians have severely damaged or totally destroyed 17 U.S. bases in the Gulf, and much of our assets have been moved to Israel over the complaint of Prime Minister Netanyahu?
I didn't know that he was complaining. That's interesting, because I would think he would welcome that, because they then become targets in Israel. And that promises to bind us ever more closely to Israel and his destiny. So I'm a little surprised at that. The answer is, of course, yes. Look, what has happened is very simple. The United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar, all of these places, Saudi Arabia, they've all come to the same conclusion. We cannot protect them. And if your hegemonic military power proves unequal to the task of protecting them, then it's time for the hegemonic military power to get the hell out. And I think what they're going to do is tell us to go. And indeed, we should, because the longer we remain, the more often they become targets. And remember, Iran has made it crystal clear that if we resume the attacks on them and do the things that President Trump has threatened he will do with the weapons at hand, that they will annihilate, destroy, remove, whatever you want to use for a word, the remaining oil infrastructure in the Gulf region and Saudi Arabia. You have the Houthis that are now making life very, very interesting in the Red Sea for the Saudis. I see no end in sight for that. So the point is that things will not go back to normal whenever this ends. In fact, things will be much bleaker. The world will have to adapt to a very different world. And by the way, once it's made clear to us that we've got to get out, there's only one power on the planet left that can actually finance the restoration or rebuilding of all that infrastructure. China.
Right. Colonel, the president is facing serious losses in the Congress, probably the loss of the House and maybe the loss of the Senate in November. Do you fear a false flag, Colonel, to change public opinion on the war radically the way December 7th, 1941 and September 11th, 2001 did?
Well, I suppose it's not impossible, but I think that ammunition was used up in 2001. We tried to exploit 2001 to do exactly that. You can't treat the global war on terror, the massive interventions in Iraq and Syria, Africa, the Middle East, in isolation from 2001. I think that's exhausted. We have virtually evacuated Iraq. The bases there are being destroyed. The Kurds have told us, thank you very much, but we're not prepared to commit suicide on behalf of you and Israel. So I think that ammunition is exhausted. So I don't think that would work if it's tried. And I'm not saying that it couldn't be tried, but I just don't see that working.
Chris,
real quick, everybody's worried about this midterms except Donald Trump. Now, why is Donald Trump not worried? Because of the enormous money behind him. You know, Larry Wilkerson sent me an email this morning talking to me about the 140, 150 million in one particular pot designed to repeat the kind of action that was taken against Thomas Massey in Congress. Another pot of money of 750 million was designed to strengthen Israel's grip, or the grip of the Israeli lobby and their billionaires on the Congress and legislation and the legislative process. You know, President Trump knows this, and with that kind of money behind him, he can protect himself against any attempt to remove him. And at this point, I think that's his only concern, that there would be an attempt to remove him from office after the midterms. And the other thing that we shouldn't lose sight of is we still think in terms of this dichotomy of Republicans versus Democrats. Judge, who are the Democrats? Who are they now?
Yeah.
Are they democratic socialists? Are they simply the party that is anti-white, the party that is anti-American in the sense that they'll come up to you and tell you, I have nothing in common with you. I don't care about the Declaration of Independence. I don't pay any attention to your Constitution. It's not me. I wasn't here. My ancestors weren't here. We don't care. I mean, that's one huge chunk of the Democratic Party. What about the Republican Party? Who are they? All they do is repeat ad nauseum Israeli talking points. People are tired of that. Who wants to hear it? Not very many people want to hear it. My age, you still have lots of boomers who just watch Fox News and think Jesse Waters is great and is his prophet. But the rest of the population, no, they don't. All you have to do is look at the polls. So I don't know what it means anymore. So I don't know what this business is like in the next congressional election.
I mean, look at those approval numbers. That's almost Nixonian. 63% disapprove, 35% approve. You're talking, of course, to an ex-Fox person. I spent much of my career there, but the most famous ex-Fox person is taking your advice, and tonight at 6:00 is interviewing, whatever you think of her, Marjorie Taylor Greene, about the beginnings of a third party. You and I have talked about this. We've talked about it privately and we've talked about it publicly, and it's been met with a lot of enthusiasm. That, I think, photo is an AI photo, but there are the people there, Tucker Carlson, Joe Kent, Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene. So that conversation is out there. I don't think there's enough time to do that before 2028. Ask Bobby Kennedy what it's like to try and start a third party, but there certainly is the animus for it. I got to post another full screen to ask you if you've ever seen or heard of anything like this from a four-star, General Grinkowicz. Without another Navy destroyer, General Grinkowicz warned he may be forced to choose defense of the United States homeland over that of Israel. How could a four-star or a buck private possibly be conflicted about whether their job is to protect the United States first over another country?
Well, Grinkowicz has answered your question. Grinkowicz has said it very clearly. What we're doing in the Middle East has nothing to do with the United States and its core strategic interests. It's a lot of nonsense. I mean, you could listen to Laura Loomer and Levin and other people rant and rage and, pour buckets of filth and abuse all over you because you simply don't think that what we're doing makes any sense for the American people. But I think most people in uniform are increasingly of that opinion. There's not much doubt. Grinkowicz is obviously speaking volumes. And this all goes back to the core problem, Judge. You brought in this man, General Kane, and I don't know him personally. Seems like a nice guy. But beyond that, he was obviously brought in. He was promoted because they were going to attack Iran. They wanted someone there who would say, yes, sir, it can be done. He was an airman. No one in the Air Force wants to admit for a second that air power is not the dominant force in the globe. In fact, the Air Force has been arguing for decades, you really don't need anybody else. We can do it all. So they got what they wanted. And people keep trying to say, well, General Kane, he did say there were limits to air power. Now, come on, wake up, smell the coffee. Attacking Iran made no sense. We had no chance of subduing that country exclusively with air and missile power. Our sanctions failed. Our diplomacy, our diplomatic attempts to undermine, isolate Iran have failed. And we have created an alliance between Russia, Iran, and China. That alliance was identified by none other than Zbigniew Brzezinski back in the mid-90s. And he said that if that should emerge, that should arise, our position on the Eurasian continent was at serious risk. In other words, we can't prevail against that. And that's what's happened. That's why this war, which began on behalf of Israel to make sure that Israel was safe again and would be more than safe, would be the dominant power in the region, and that their interests of their friends in the United States would be well served in the financial markets. All of that has now had a terrible impact on us strategically, because in addition to identifying us as you started out with to some extent, as kind of a paper tiger after all this time, because we have the wrong instruments for the wrong war in the wrong place at the wrong time, we have now seen this alliance emerge, and this alliance is backed by hundreds of other states and organizations around the globe, all of whom are sick to death of us, are bullying through the financial system, through the IMF, through the World Bank, and want to see an end to this undesirable American financial and military hegemony.